and welcome to Dice vs Cards. Today we're looking at Taverns of Tiefenthal. And we ask the questions, does deck building have another set of friendly mechanics? We also ponder over whether a bunch of different modules that you can add to a game are just going to create a chaotic mess. And finally, and arguably most importantly, we find out whether it's supposed to be Tiefenthal or Tiefenthal. So let's see how this plays and whether this could be the next game for you. So the object of the game is to be the player with the most points at the end of 8 rounds of play. Now each player is going to have their own tavern board, which is almost like a jigsaw, and it's going to represent the different moving parts and ways that you can upgrade it. You've also got a communal area of cards. So here are all the helpers that can help you run the tavern most optimally, and then you've got guests, because it's ultimately guests that are going to be getting you the points that come the end of the game. You've then got this monastery board that doubles as both a turn marker and another means for you to gain bonus objectives throughout. So you'll start with a starting deck, and this is a deck building game amongst other things. You're going to be upgrading that deck as you go. So during each turn you're going to have a mix of simultaneous player actions and a turn-based order of things. But at the start of every turn you're going to be drawing cards from your deck, and you're going to be placing those cards in your tavern. So you'll start with 3 empty tables that you're looking to fill, but you may purchase and even start the game with extra table cards. And you're going to basically draw cards from the top of your deck until you've filled all those tables of guests. But you'll also be drawing workers in your tavern as well, and they'll be placed in certain areas and will give you benefits, mostly in relation to manipulating dice and getting extra resources. So once you've laid out who's visiting and working in your tavern on a turn, you'll then roll the 4 dice that you get at the start of every game. But you can add dice to that if you ever draw servers from here. So this card being drawn allows you to immediately roll a dice of your choice to be used as well. So once you've rolled those dice, you're then going to draft those dice, and you need to know which dice you're going to want to use on your turn and look out for those facings accordingly. So the guests that you start with need you to place dice on them with the facings of 1 and 2. So anytime you take those, you can place them on here to get thalers or coins, and this is your form of currency throughout the game. So normally, depending on what dice facing you place on them, will be the amount of thalers you'll get. But you'll also need the means to get beers, because beers are going to be the way you're going to be attracting guests. So by default you can place any 1s or 6s to get a beer, but you've also got these default cash registers and beer barrels that will allow you to put any die facings on them to get a thaler or a beer accordingly. So you're going to pick 1 dice at a time and pass the remainder round to the player to your left, and then you're going to go round and round until you've each picked all 4 dice. Once you've placed your dice, you'll then in turn order get the resources from them. So here this player is going to get 4 thalers that they can then use to upgrade their workers, because the cost of those are here in the top left hand corner. So as soon as they use that money, they can then place that card on the top of their deck, knowing full well then that they're going to draw that card in the next turn. Beers, on the other hand, as I've already alluded to, this player's going to get 2 beers for placing these 2 dice. So that's not enough to buy any of the cards, again the currency for which is in the top left hand corner. But what you can do is you can store your beers. Now I've also shown here the flip side of this part of the tavern. This isn't the way you'd normally start with. So whenever you've got spare thalers and spare coins, you can pay that amount to flip that part of your tavern, inherently upgrading it. So here on the flip side will only allow you to store 2 beer between turns, but here we can store up to 5. So the other parts of the tavern have similar upgraded effects. So as the rounds progress, you're going to access more bonuses and also the means to manipulate dice with temporary guests and the like. You'll also be able to increase on the monastery tracker that will give you further bonuses. So that's the core set of the game, but there are also some modules you can add in a linear fashion, like this reputation tracker here that goes behind the bar. You'll flip that tile and that's another sub game for you to play. Similarly with the guest book here, gives you more means to gain access to bonuses and just adds a few more bells and whistles to the core game. So after 8 rounds of play, you'll then add up all the points you've got from your guest cards and any workers you recruited, and then the player with the most points is the winner. So that's how this game plays. What did I think of it? So what's so good about the game? Well, first and foremost for me, it's how the deck building is paired with the drafting and dice placement. They make absolutely perfect bedfellows, where the focal point is the board. Everything ties together nicely. The way it subverts the deck building conventions where you buy a card and you put it in the discard pile. Here you're putting it back on top of the deck, which just adds for a little bit more predictability and strategy to proceedings, whilst retaining the luck element, because ultimately you will be reshuffling that deck. So secondly, it's got a really nice flow to the game. The way it combines simultaneous player actions with a turn-based setup just fits nicely. Everything feels like it's been well thought out and well designed, and ultimately well executed here. The module system in here is a real selling point for me. The way the base game is absolutely fine on its own. That's the least complex version of the game. But then you've got a bunch of modules that you can add in a linear fashion. So by that I mean, if you want to play module 5, you have to play the preceding ones. But they will allow you to choose the best version of the game you want, and they all added something small and something intriguing to the way you play the game. I honestly think this could be a template for the way modules are added into the game moving forward. So what's not so good about the game? Well, I must admit I really struggled with this part of the review, but I've come up with a couple of small things. The first is that the balancing with the drafting in the early game is less than optimal. You're all fighting over 1s and 2s and 5s and 6s. Yes, you can do things with 3s and 4s, but I think there could have been a little more thought put into that early game balance. Yes, you could perhaps have started with dishwasher cards in your deck to allow you to manipulate dice or something like that. And secondly, where are the player reference cards? Come on, you've got quite a fairly elegant phase sequence to your turn, although some feel like sub-phases, but just let's have that player reference card for everyone to remind ourselves how you do things and in what order. Ultimately, we did learn that deck building is the most friendly mechanic in the world, because it's got a couple of new pals to come to the party. Really, this isn't just a deck building game. All of the elements bring something equal, but I just love that we're finding different ways to meld with deck builders to make for ultimately great games. There's also here a brilliant execution of all the modules. It never becomes a chaotic mess. This is really could be used as a template for how you do this, and is really a testament to what I perceive to be how much love was poured into making this game, because it is just such a nice, whole and well-rounded offering. So with all that being said, Dice vs Cards going to give a final score of 8 out of 10. Now I want to point out at this point, I don't give 10 out of 10, so for most people this would be a 9 out of 10. I really did teeter with giving it a 9 out of 10, but there probably is just a little bit of a ceiling to this game when you compare it to the pantheon of great world-class games out there. However, I adore this game and I heartily recommend it to you all. So that's it from me. I'll see you next time.
It is hereby decreed that our fair town will be pronounced Tiefenthal. Anyone uttering Tiefenthal will be surely punished.